Tonight, you are not a king, knight, or wealthy merchant. Instead, you are one of the most important people in a medieval town, a baker. While everyone else sleeps beneath heavy wool blankets, your work has already begun. Long before sunrise, you leave your warm bed and step into the cold darkness. The streets are silent except for the distant barking of dogs and the ringing of a monastery bell. Within a few hours, hundreds of hungry villagers will depend on the bread you bake today. If you fail, an entire neighborhood may go hungry. Your workplace is filled with smoke, flour dust, glowing embers, and the comforting smell of fresh bread. Yet behind that delicious aroma lies exhausting labor, dangerous heat, strict guild rules, and the constant fear of producing loaves that are too small, or too expensive, for the king's inspectors. So, settle in beside the warm oven, listen to the crackling fire, and journey back nearly 700 years to discover what life was truly like for a medieval baker. It is around 2 o'clock in the morning. The stars still cover the sky, and frost clings to the rooftops. Almost every window in town is dark. Except yours. You light a small tallow candle and quietly dress in your simple wool tunic. Your wife is still asleep. Your apprentice is snoring on a straw mattress in the corner. Outside, the cold air bites your face. Soon, your bakery will become the warmest building in town. You unlock the heavy wooden door. The familiar smell of yesterday's ashes greets you. Now the real work begins. The bakery is completely silent. Only the faint sound of your footsteps echoes across the worn stone floor as you walk toward the great brick oven that dominates the room. It is the heart of your bakery, larger than any fireplace found in an ordinary home, and without it, there will be no bread today. Yesterday's fire has long since died. You kneel before the oven and brush away the gray ashes left behind. Tiny clouds of ash drift into the candlelight before settling gently onto the floor. Hidden beneath the ashes, a few small embers still glow a deep orange. They are nearly dead, but with patience, they can help awaken a new fire. You begin by placing bundles of dry oak and beech wood inside the oven. Hardwoods burn hotter and longer than softer woods, making them the preferred choice for medieval bakers whenever they could afford them. A small spark catches. Then another. Soon, thin ribbons of smoke curl toward the ceiling. The fire slowly grows stronger. There is no thermometer to tell you when the oven is ready. Everything depends on experience, knowledge passed from one baker to another over many generations. You watch the flames carefully. You listen to the sound of burning wood. You even judge the heat by standing close enough to feel it against your face without getting burned. As the fire grows, the thick brick walls begin storing enormous amounts of heat. Medieval bread ovens were designed like giant batteries. Once heated for several hours, the bricks would continue radiating warmth long after the flames had disappeared. That stored heat would bake hundreds of loaves without a single burning log remaining inside. The fire roars louder. Orange light dances across the wooden beams overhead. Outside, the village remains wrapped in darkness. Inside, your bakery feels like the center of the world. While waiting for the oven to reach the proper temperature, there is no time to rest. You carry in more bundles of firewood from the storage shed. Every piece must stay dry. Damp wood creates too much smoke and not enough heat, ruining both the fire and the bread. Firewood is expensive. During harsh winters, its cost can rise almost as quickly as the price of grain. A careful baker learns never to waste either. As the oven continues heating, sweat begins forming on your forehead despite the freezing morning outside. One side of your body feels almost unbearably hot. The other still remembers the chill of the night. This strange balance between fire and frost is simply part of life as a medieval baker. Hours pass before the oven is finally ready. Using a long wooden rake, you pull the burning logs and glowing embers from the baking chamber. Bright sparks leap into the air before settling onto the stone floor, where they quickly fade. The inside of the oven now glows with stored heat. Its pale brick walls tell you everything you need to know. The temperature is perfect. Soon, the first loaves of bread will slide across the hot stone floor, and the entire village will awaken to the smell of fresh baking. But first, you must make the dough. The great oven is finally hot. Its thick brick walls now hold hours of stored heat, quietly glowing in the dim light of your bakery. The hardest part of warming the oven is over, but the most important work is only beginning. A bakery without dough is nothing more than a warm room. You walk towards several large wooden bins stacked against the wall. Inside them rests your most valuable possession, not gold, not silver, but flour. Every handful represents months of work in the fields. Last autumn, farmers sowed the grain by hand. Through winter rains and summer sunshine, they watched the crops grow. When harvest finally arrived, families spent long days cutting wheat with curved sickles before carrying heavy bundles to the village mill. There, the miller's great stone wheels slowly crushed the grain into flour. Some flour is pale and finely sifted, reserved for wealthy households, monasteries, and the local lord. Most, however, is darker and coarser, containing bits of bran that give the bread a hearty texture. This is the bread of ordinary people, the bread that feeds nearly every family in the village. You scoop the flour into a massive wooden trough polished smooth by decades of use. Fine white dust rises into the air, settling on your sleeves, your beard, and even your eyelashes. By midday, you will be covered in flour from head to toe. Many medieval bakers joked that they looked more like ghosts than men. Next comes water. You carry a bucket drawn earlier from the town well. The water is cool and clear, but you know better than to pour it all at once. Too much water, and the dough becomes sticky and weak. Too little, and the bread will be dense and hard enough to crack a tooth. There are no measuring cups. No scales accurate to the gram. Everything depends on practiced hands and careful eyes. Now you reach for a small wooden bowl containing yesterday's sourdough starter. This humble mixture of flour and water is alive with wild yeast gathered naturally from the air. It has been carefully fed and preserved day after day, perhaps for years. Some bakeries guarded their starter as carefully as merchants guarded their money, believing it gave their bread a flavor no rival could match. You mix the starter into the flour. A handful of salt follows. Salt is precious. It not only improves the taste but also helps strengthen the dough. Too much would spoil the loaf. Too little would leave it bland. Then comes the hardest part. You plunge both hands into the mixture. At first it feels rough and crumbly. Slowly, it begins to come together. You press. Fold. Turn. Press again. The dough grows smoother with every movement. Your shoulders ache. Your arms burn. Mixing enough dough to feed hundreds of people is exhausting work, and there are no electric mixers to help you. Every loaf begins with human strength. Your apprentice finally arrives, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Without a word, he joins you at the trough. Together, you knead the heavy mass in a slow, steady rhythm. The only sounds are your breathing, the soft slap of dough against wood, and the gentle crackling of the great oven behind you. Outside, the eastern horizon is beginning to lighten. The village is still asleep. But beneath your hands, today's bread, and the day's first meal for countless families, is beginning to take shape. The dough is finally ready. After nearly an hour of mixing, folding, and kneading, the heavy mass has transformed into something smooth, elastic, and alive. It no longer clings stubbornly to your hands. Instead, it stretches gently before settling back into place. You run a thin layer of flour across its surface. This simple step prevents the damp dough from sticking to the wooden trough as it rests. Now comes one of the quietest parts of the baker's day. Waiting. You cover the dough with thick linen cloths to protect it from dust and cold drafts. The bakery is warm from the great oven, creating the perfect environment for the invisible yeast to do its work. Nothing appears to happen. Yet beneath the surface, millions of tiny living organisms are feasting on the flour's natural sugars. As they do, they release countless bubbles of carbon dioxide, slowly filling the dough with pockets of air. Of course, you know nothing of microbes or carbon dioxide. Those discoveries are centuries in the future. To you, the dough simply seems to come alive. Experienced bakers often describe it as waking up. You gently press a finger into the surface. The small dent slowly disappears. A good sign. Nearby, your apprentice sweeps flour from the floor while humming a quiet church hymn. Every few minutes he glances toward the dough, eager to begin shaping loaves. You smile. Patience is one of the first lessons every apprentice must learn. Rush the dough, and the bread will be heavy. Wait too long, and it may collapse. The timing must be almost perfect. While the dough rises, you finally have a brief moment to look outside. The eastern sky has turned a soft gray blue. Mist hangs low over the village fields. A rooster crows somewhere beyond the church. Thin streams of smoke begin rising from a few cottages as families wake and light their morning fires. Soon, mothers will prepare porridge. Children will rub sleep from their eyes. Farmers will shoulder their tools before walking toward the fields. Many of them will stop at your bakery first. For most villagers, bread is not merely part of breakfast. It is breakfast. It will also accompany lunch and supper. A poor harvest might mean less meat or fewer vegetables, but bread remains the foundation of nearly every meal. Its importance is impossible to overstate. As you return inside, the bakery feels even warmer than before. The dough has nearly doubled in size. Its surface is rounded and smooth, with tiny bubbles just beneath the skin. You press it gently once more. This time, the dough slowly sighs beneath your fingers. It is ready. The long wait has ended. Now comes the moment every baker looks forward to, the shaping of the loaves that, within the hour, will fill the village with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. The dough has risen beautifully. You pull back the heavy linen cloth, and a gentle, warm aroma drifts upward. It is slightly sweet, faintly tangy, and unmistakably alive. The dough has nearly doubled in size, its smooth surface dotted with tiny air pockets created during the quiet hours of rising. For a brief moment, you simply admire it. A skilled baker learns to recognize good dough at a glance. Its texture, its smell, even the way it moves beneath your fingertips tells a story. Years of experience have trained your senses better than any written guide ever could. But there is no time to linger. The village will soon awaken. You dust the broad wooden worktable with a generous layer of flour. White powder settles across the worn surface like the first snowfall of winter. Then, with both hands, you lift the enormous mass of dough from the trough. It lands on the table with a soft, satisfying thud. Using a wooden scraper, you begin dividing it into smaller portions. Each piece must be nearly the same size. In many medieval towns, the weight of a loaf was regulated by law. If a baker sold bread that was too light, customers could complain to the local authorities. Repeated offenses might result in heavy fines, public punishment, or even the loss of the right to bake. Bread was considered too essential to daily life to leave entirely to chance. Your apprentice watches carefully. You hand him a small piece of dough. Round it gently, you instruct. He presses too hard. The air escapes with a quiet hiss. You smile patiently. Not like that. You demonstrate again, folding the edges inward before rolling the dough beneath your palms in smooth, circular motions. Gradually, the rough lump becomes a neat, round loaf with a tight, smooth surface. He tries again. This time, it is much better. Dozens of loaves begin to fill the long wooden boards that line the bakery walls. Some are large family loaves, meant to feed 6 or 7 people for several days. Others are smaller rolls, purchased by travelers, laborers, or children carrying a few precious coins. A few special loaves receive extra care. These are destined for the monastery and the manor house. Made from finer flour and shaped with greater precision, they reflect the higher status of those who will eat them. Before the bread goes into the oven, each loaf is scored with a sharp knife. A simple cross. A single slash. 2 parallel cuts. These marks are more than decoration. They allow steam to escape during baking, helping the bread expand without splitting unpredictably. Some bakers also use distinctive patterns so customers recognize their work instantly in a busy marketplace. The bakery has become a rhythm of quiet industry. Hands dusted with flour. Wooden boards filling one by one. The soft scrape of knives. The muffled crackle of the great oven waiting nearby. Outside, the first rays of sunlight touch the rooftops of the village. Inside, row after row of perfectly shaped loaves waits for the next step. Soon, they will meet the fierce heat of the great brick oven. And within an hour, their golden crusts will announce to the entire village that a new day has truly begun. The moment has arrived. The great brick oven has been heating since the middle of the night. Its flames are gone now, but the thick stone walls still radiate an intense, steady warmth. This stored heat is what will transform simple dough into nourishing bread. You take a long wooden peel, nearly as tall as you are. Its broad, flat blade has been dusted with flour so the dough will slide easily. With practiced hands, you lift the first loaf. It is surprisingly delicate. Only minutes ago it felt firm beneath your palms, but after its final rise, it has become light and airy. Every movement must be gentle. A careless bump could force out the precious air trapped inside. You place the loaf onto the peel. One smooth motion. Then another. Soon, several loaves rest upon the wide wooden board. You step toward the mouth of the oven. A wave of heat washes over your face, far hotter than any summer afternoon. Your cheeks flush instantly, and beads of sweat form on your forehead despite the cool morning outside. This is the hottest place in the entire village. You slide the peel deep into the oven. With a quick, practiced jerk of your wrists, the first loaf glides onto the hot stone floor. Then the second. The third. The fourth. One after another, each loaf finds its place inside the glowing chamber. There is no room for hesitation. The loaves must be spaced carefully so hot air can circulate around them. Too close together, and they will bake unevenly. Too far apart, and valuable oven space is wasted. Every inch matters. Once the oven is full, you close the heavy wooden door. Now, there is nothing to do but wait. Inside the sealed chamber, something remarkable is happening. The trapped air within each loaf expands rapidly in the heat. Moisture turns to steam. The dough rises one final time, becoming lighter than ever before. At the same time, the outer surface begins to harden into a crust that will protect the soft crumb inside. You cannot see any of this. You can only imagine it. There is no glass window in the oven door. No timer ticks away the minutes. Your only guides are experience, the scent drifting from tiny cracks around the door, and the rhythm of countless mornings just like this one. As the minutes pass, the bakery slowly fills with one of the most comforting aromas in the medieval world. Fresh bread. The rich scent escapes through the chimney and open doorway, carried on the cool morning breeze. Outside, villagers notice it immediately. A farmer leading his oxen toward the field smiles. Two children walking with empty baskets begin to hurry. An elderly woman, wrapped in a thick wool shawl, changes her path toward your bakery. The smell of baking bread is more than pleasant. It is a promise. A promise that breakfast is near. A promise that the harvest has provided enough grain. A promise that, for at least one more day, the village will eat. You open the oven door for just a heartbeat. A blast of shimmering heat pours into the room. The pale loaves you placed inside only moments ago are already changing. Their surfaces have turned a beautiful golden brown. Tiny cracks begin to appear across the crust. You tap one gently with a wooden stick. It answers with a hollow sound. Almost ready. Soon, the first warm loaves will emerge from the oven, and a line of hungry customers will already be waiting outside your door. The church bell rings softly across the village. For most people, it is the signal that a new day has begun. For you, it feels as though half the day has already passed. You grasp the long wooden peel once again and open the oven door. A wave of fragrant steam rolls out, carrying the unmistakable scent of freshly baked bread. The first loaves are ready. One by one, you slide them onto the peel and carry them to the large wooden cooling racks. Their crusts are a rich golden brown, lightly dusted with flour. As they cool, they make tiny crackling sounds, almost as if the bread itself is whispering after its journey through the fire. Your apprentice cannot resist. He leans in close, breathing deeply. "There is no better smell," he says with a smile. You simply nod. After years in the bakery, you hardly notice the aroma anymore, but whenever you leave town for a few days, it is the scent you miss most. Outside, the village is fully awake. The first customers are already gathering. A farmer still wearing muddy boots waits patiently with a small cloth purse hanging from his belt. Behind him stands a widow carrying a woven basket lined with clean linen. Two children clutch a single copper coin between them, carefully counting its value again and again. Bread is purchased almost every day. Unlike cheese or smoked meat, it cannot be stored for long. Fresh bread is always preferred, and most families visit the bakery several times each week. You unlock the front shutters. Cool morning air flows inside. Immediately, the smell of warm bread spills into the street. The waiting customers smile. One by one, they step forward. "Good morning." "The usual loaf, please. My son is working in the fields today." "We'll need two." You know nearly everyone by name. In a village this small, the baker is more than a tradesman. You hear news before almost anyone else. A farmer mentions that the barley crop looks promising. A traveler speaks of heavy rain in a neighboring town. Someone whispers that a royal messenger was seen riding the main road yesterday. Every loaf you sell is accompanied by conversation. The bakery becomes the village's unofficial meeting place. Coins clink softly into your wooden cash box. Most are copper pennies, worn smooth from years of use. Occasionally, a customer has no money at all. Instead, they offer eggs, a bundle of onions, fresh butter, or perhaps a small wheel of cheese. Bartering is common, especially during difficult seasons. A baker who refuses every poor customer may soon find himself disliked by the very people who depend upon him. As the morning continues, the shelves begin to empty. The largest loaves disappear first. Then the smaller round loaves. Finally, even yesterday's bread finds a buyer. Though no longer soft, stale bread is never wasted. It can be soaked in broth, made into puddings, or fed to animals if it becomes too hard. Nothing is thrown away. By mid-morning, your bakery is quieter once more. The rush has passed. Most villagers are now working in the fields, tending gardens, repairing fences, or walking toward the marketplace. You wipe the flour from the wooden counter and glance toward the oven. There is still enough heat inside for another batch. The day is far from over. Before the sun reaches its highest point, you will bake again, this time for travelers, monks, and perhaps even the Lord's household, where expectations are much higher and every loaf must be nearly perfect. The morning rush is over. For a little while, your bakery is quiet again. Only the soft crackle of the cooling oven and the distant sounds of carts rolling through the village disturb the silence. You take a sip of cool water and glance at the shelves. Many of the finest loaves have already been sold. That is good. But baking bread is not simply about making food. It is also about following the law. In the medieval kingdom, bread is considered too important to leave entirely to chance. Nearly every family depends on it every day. If dishonest bakers made their loaves smaller while charging the same price, people could quickly go hungry. For that reason, the king's officials sometimes inspect bakeries without warning. You have heard stories from neighboring towns. A baker caught cheating his customers might be fined heavily. Another could lose his right to trade. Some were even forced to stand in the marketplace while neighbors mocked them for selling poor bread. The punishments are severe because bread is the foundation of daily life. You walk toward the wooden balance scale resting on your workbench. It is one of the most valuable tools in the bakery. Before selling each batch, you weigh several loaves. One after another. A loaf that is too heavy costs you money. A loaf that is too light could cost you your reputation. Finding the perfect balance is part of your craft. Nearby, your apprentice watches carefully. He asks why every loaf cannot simply be made larger. You smile. If bread is too cheap, No baker can afford flour. If bread is too expensive, the villagers cannot afford to eat. Somewhere between those two extremes lies fairness. And fairness keeps both baker and customer alive. Outside, the marketplace grows louder. Merchants call out the prices of vegetables, cloth, fish, and pottery. Blacksmiths hammer glowing iron. Children weave through the crowd chasing one another between stalls. Your bakery, however, remains calm. The thick stone walls keep out much of the noise. Inside, only the comforting smell of bread lingers in the warm air. You begin preparing another batch. This one is different. Some customers have requested smaller loaves. Others prefer darker bread made from rye or barley instead of expensive wheat. Not everyone can afford fine white bread. In fact, for most villagers, darker bread is the everyday choice. It is denser, more filling, and made from grains that grow well even in difficult years. White bread, soft and finely sifted, is often reserved for wealthy merchants, noble families, and important guests. As you knead the next batch, you think about the responsibility resting in your hands. Every loaf represents trust. The villagers trust you to feed them honestly. The miller trusts you not to waste his flour. The farmers trust that their harvest will become nourishing food. Even the lord of the manor expects fresh bread to appear at his table without fail. Being a medieval baker is more than a profession. It is a promise to the entire community. And tomorrow morning, long before the first rooster crows, you will wake once again to keep that promise. By late morning, the bakery has settled into a quieter rhythm. The shelves that were crowded with fresh loaves at sunrise now hold only a handful of round breads. Most have already found their way into cottages, farmhouses, and market stalls throughout the village. Just as you begin mixing another batch of ordinary dough, a familiar knock echoes against the wooden door. 3 slow knocks. It is Brother Thomas from the nearby monastery. His dark wool robe is dusty from the walk, and a rope belt hangs loosely around his waist. He offers a warm smile before placing a small cloth pouch onto your counter. Inside are dried apples, a little honey, and a few precious spices. "They are for the feast," he says quietly. You nod. Today is no ordinary baking day. The monastery has requested sweet bread. Unlike the simple loaves eaten by most villagers, this bread is a luxury. Honey replaces some of the plain water's sweetness, while dried fruits and fragrant spices turn an everyday loaf into something worthy of a celebration. Such ingredients are costly. Honey must be gathered from beehives with great care. Cinnamon, cloves, and other spices travel thousands of miles from distant lands, passing through many merchants before reaching even the wealthiest medieval towns. For most villagers, these flavors are tasted only a few times each year. You begin with your finest flour. It feels softer between your fingers than the coarse meal used for ordinary bread. Into the wooden bowl goes warm water, a pinch of salt, yesterday's sourdough starter, and a generous spoonful of golden honey. The honey catches the morning light like liquid amber. Its sweet scent fills the bakery. Your apprentice watches with wide eyes. He has helped bake hundreds of common loaves, but sweet bread is something special. You knead the dough slowly, making sure every drop of honey disappears into the mixture. Then come the dried apples. A handful of raisins. A few crushed nuts. Finally, Brother Thomas carefully unwraps a tiny paper packet containing cinnamon. The spice is so valuable that not a single grain is wasted. You sprinkle it gently across the dough. Almost instantly, the bakery smells different. The familiar aroma of flour and wood smoke is joined by warm notes of honey and spice, creating a fragrance unlike anything baked on an ordinary day. You fold the ingredients through the dough until every piece of fruit is evenly spread. This bread will not be large. There simply are not enough costly ingredients for that. Instead, you shape several smaller round loaves, each one carefully decorated with a simple cross cut into its surface. The loaves rise quietly near the oven while Brother Thomas tells stories of the monastery. He speaks of monks copying books by candlelight, tending herb gardens, ringing the chapel bells, and sharing meals in silence. Although your worlds are different, they are connected. The monks pray for the village. You feed it. Soon, the sweet loaves slide into the warm oven. As they bake, honey begins to caramelize on the crust, giving the bread a deeper golden color than ordinary loaves. The smell drifting from the oven is extraordinary. Even people passing outside slow their steps. Some pause. Some smile. A few wonder whether today might be a feast day after all. When the bread finally emerges, its crust shines softly in the afternoon light. Brother Thomas carefully wraps each loaf in clean linen before placing them into his basket. He thanks you with a quiet bow. Then he disappears down the winding path toward the monastery, carrying bread that will be shared during prayer, celebration, and fellowship. The bakery grows quiet once again. Yet the lingering scent of honey and cinnamon remains in the warm air, reminding you that not every loaf is baked simply to satisfy hunger. Some are baked to mark the most meaningful moments of medieval life. The sweet bread for the monastery has barely cooled when another visitor arrives. This time, it is not a monk. It is one of the Lord's household servants. His cloak bears the colors of the local manor, and his leather boots are far cleaner than those of the farmers who visited at sunrise. A small wax-sealed note hangs from his belt. He bows politely. The steward requests today's order. You already know what that means. The castle expects its bread before the midday meal. Unlike the villagers, who are grateful for any fresh loaf, the Lord's household has very particular standards. Every loaf must be evenly baked, perfectly shaped, and made from the finest flour available. Mistakes are remembered. Excellent bread is expected. You unlock a separate wooden chest. Inside lies your best flour, ground from carefully sifted wheat. It is almost white, soft as powder, and free from the coarse bran that remains in ordinary village bread. Few people in the kingdom eat bread like this every day. For most families, it would be an expensive luxury. You measure the flour with extra care. The dough must be smooth enough to produce a light, delicate crumb. The crust should be thin and crisp rather than thick and hearty. As you knead, your apprentice asks whether the bread truly tastes better. You pause for a moment before answering. It tastes different, you say. But hunger often makes simple bread the sweetest. The apprentice smiles. He understands. To a laborer returning from the fields after a long day, even coarse rye bread can seem like a feast. While the dough rests, you prepare several smaller loaves shaped especially for the manor table. Unlike the round village loaves, these are longer and more elegant. A few are decorated with braided strips of dough. Others receive delicate scoring across the top, creating patterns that will open beautifully during baking. Presentation matters. The Lord's guests will notice every detail. The oven, still warm from the monastery's bread, is perfect for this batch. One by one, the refined loaves disappear into the glowing chamber. You close the heavy oven door. As they bake, the crust develops a pale golden color rather than the darker shade common on village bread. The aroma is gentle, buttery, and clean. Even without expensive ingredients, the fine flour creates a noticeably different scent. Soon, the servant returns with a sturdy wicker basket lined in spotless linen. You carefully arrange the finished loaves inside, separating them with cloth so they will not lose their crisp crust during the journey. The servant inspects the bread with a practiced eye. He nods in approval. Without another word, he lifts the basket and begins the short walk toward the manor house. You watch him disappear along the road. For a brief moment, you imagine the castle kitchens. Large fireplaces roar beneath hanging iron pots. Cooks prepare roasted meats, fresh vegetables, rich stews, and sweet pastries. Servants hurry through long stone corridors carrying trays to the great hall. Among all those elaborate dishes, your bread will still hold an honored place at the table. Yet as you return to your workbench, you cannot help but think of the farmer who bought a single dark loaf this morning with his last few coins. Both the Lord and the laborer will eat bread today. Their meals may look very different, but in the end, every table in the kingdom depends on the quiet work of the village baker. The afternoon sun now shines brightly through the bakery window. There is still flour to sweep, tools to clean, and another lesson waiting for your apprentice before the day's work is done. The busiest part of the day has passed. The morning customers have returned to their farms, the monastery has received its sweet bread, and the Lord's household is preparing its midday meal. For the first time since the middle of the night, the bakery is almost peaceful. Only you and your apprentice remain. He cannot be more than 14 years old. His hands are rough from work, his sleeves are permanently dusted with flour, and a faint burn mark runs across one wrist, a reminder of a lesson learned too quickly near the oven. Like many apprentices in the Middle Ages, he did not simply apply for the job. Years ago, his parents arranged for him to learn the trade. In return for food, clothing, and instruction, he agreed to serve you faithfully for several years. One day, if he proves skilled enough, he may become a journeyman. Perhaps even a master baker with a shop of his own. But that day is still far away. For now, every morning begins with sweeping the floor. He takes the straw broom and carefully gathers the flour scattered across the stone tiles. Nothing is wasted. Clean flour can sometimes be reused for dusting work tables, while spoiled scraps are fed to chickens or pigs. Next comes the wooden tools. The long peels are wiped clean. Mixing bowls are scrubbed with warm water. The great dough trough is carefully scraped, ensuring no hardened pieces remain before tomorrow's batch. Soap is rare. Instead, hot water, sand, and hard work keep the bakery clean. You explain that cleanliness is not simply about appearance. Old scraps of dough can spoil fresh batches. Ash left in the oven can affect the flavor of tomorrow's bread. A careless baker soon earns an unhappy reputation. Your apprentice listens closely. He asks more questions than you did at his age. Sometimes too many. But curiosity is better than carelessness. You decide today's lesson will be shaping rolls. You hand him a lump of fresh dough. Not too tight, you remind him. If you squeeze out all the air, the bread will become heavy. He nods. Slowly, he folds the edges inward, turning the dough with both hands. It is better than yesterday. Still not perfect. One roll ends up slightly lopsided. Another develops a crack along its side. You do not scold him. Instead, you place one of your own finished rolls beside his. The difference is subtle. Your loaf is smoother, more even. Its surface feels almost silky beneath the flour. Watch the dough, you tell him. It will teach you more than I can. He smiles quietly. As the afternoon sunlight streams through the bakery window, tiny particles of flour drift lazily through the golden beams. The room feels warm, comfortable, safe. It is hard to imagine that only a few hours earlier this same bakery was filled with roaring fire, heavy labor, and the frantic pace of the morning rush. The apprentice finishes cleaning the workbench and carefully hangs the wooden peel on its hook. One day, he will use that peel as confidently as you do. But not today. Today, he is still learning that baking bread is not just about strength or speed. It is about patience, attention, and respect, for the grain, for the fire, and for the people who will share each loaf around their tables. Outside, the afternoon slowly begins to fade. Inside, another quiet lesson has come to an end. Tomorrow, before dawn, the learning will begin again. The days grow shorter. Morning darkness lingers longer over the village, and a thin layer of frost coats every rooftop. The fields that were once green with wheat are now bare, resting beneath the cold sky. Winter has arrived. For a medieval baker, winter brings challenges that summer never does. Before dawn, you push open the bakery door. A blast of icy air rushes inside. Your breath forms pale clouds as you walk across the stone floor. Even the wooden tables feel frozen beneath your fingertips. The bakery is colder than the outdoors was just a few months ago. Only the great brick oven can chase away the chill. You begin your familiar routine. Ashes are swept aside. Fresh oak logs are stacked carefully inside. Soon, the first flames begin to dance. The warmth spreads slowly through the room, reaching every corner little by little. During winter, the oven is more than a place to bake bread. It is the warmest place in the entire village. Neighbors sometimes stop by simply to warm their hands for a few moments before continuing their work. Travelers linger near the doorway, grateful for even a few breaths of warm air. The smell of burning wood becomes as comforting as the smell of fresh bread itself. But winter also means something else. Less grain. The previous autumn's harvest must now last until the next one. Every sack of flour is precious. Every handful matters. You open the storage chest. It is not empty. But it is noticeably lower than it was in early autumn. You silently calculate how many weeks remain before spring. If the harvest was poor, prices rise. Families who once bought large wheat loaves may now choose smaller ones. Some begin mixing rye, barley, or even oat flour into their bread to make supplies last longer. The loaves become darker, heavier, more filling. Though not as soft, they satisfy hungry stomachs through the long, cold months. Your apprentice notices the change. "The bread looks different," he says. "It does," you reply. But winter teaches us to be thankful for what we have. Outside, snowflakes begin drifting quietly through the air. Children laugh as they chase one another across the village square, leaving tiny footprints behind. Inside the bakery, the fire crackles steadily. A woman enters carrying a small basket. Instead of coins, she offers a bundle of dried herbs and a jar of preserved apples. You accept them with a smile. Winter often brings more barter than money. Everyone helps one another where they can. The bakery has become more than a place of business. It is a place of comfort. People linger longer than usual, enjoying the warmth while exchanging stories. One farmer speaks of wolves seen near the forest. Another tells of frozen rivers farther north. An old woman remembers winters even harsher than this one, when snow covered the roads for weeks. You listen while shaping another batch of dough. Outside, the world feels quiet beneath its blanket of snow. Inside, the glowing oven, warm bread, and gentle conversation make the bakery feel like a small refuge from the cold. As evening approaches, you remove the final loaves from the oven. Their crusts are darker than usual, made from the season's remaining grains. They may not be luxurious, but they are warm. They are nourishing. And for many families, they will make the difference between hunger and comfort on another long winter night. You bank the fire carefully, saving as much heat as possible for tomorrow. Outside, snow continues to fall in silence. Inside, the bakery remains warm, glowing softly against the darkness of the medieval winter. The village feels different today. Long before sunrise, cheerful voices drift through the narrow streets. Church bells ring more often than usual, and colorful banners flutter gently from wooden buildings. Today is a festival day. Perhaps it is the feast of the village's patron saint. Perhaps it marks the end of the harvest. Whatever the reason, people have something to celebrate. For you, however, a festival means one thing above all else. More bread. Much more bread. You rise even earlier than usual. The bakery is already alive with activity before the first hint of dawn touches the eastern sky. Your apprentice carries in extra sacks of flour. The oven burns hotter than on an ordinary day. Large wooden bowls crowd every work table. Today's customers will expect something special. Not just the simple round loaves they buy throughout the week. Festival bread is meant to be beautiful. You begin preparing a richer dough than usual. A little more salt. A little more honey. A handful of dried fruits saved carefully for this occasion. Even families of modest means try to add a small touch of luxury to their meals during festivals. For one day, ordinary life feels brighter. As the dough rises, women from the village arrive carrying baskets filled with eggs, fresh butter, and fragrant herbs. Some ask you to bake their family's own dough alongside your loaves. In many medieval villages, not every home had a proper bread oven. Instead, families prepared their dough at home and paid the village baker a small fee to bake it in the great communal oven. Soon, the bakery is filled with dozens of different loaves. Some are round. Some are braided. Others are decorated with small twists of dough shaped into flowers, leaves, or simple crosses. Each family recognizes its own bread by the markings placed on top before baking. You arrange every loaf carefully inside the oven. The warm air quickly fills with an extraordinary mixture of aromas. Fresh wheat, sweet honey, roasted nuts, warm spices. For a moment, the bakery smells more like a royal kitchen than a village workshop. Outside, musicians begin tuning their instruments. A fiddle sings softly. A small drum keeps a steady rhythm. Children laugh as they run through the marketplace wearing their finest clothes. The entire village seems lighter than usual. When the first festival loaves emerge from the oven, their golden crusts glisten beautifully in the morning light. Some are brushed lightly with honey while still warm, giving them a gentle shine. Others are sprinkled with poppy seeds or fragrant herbs gathered from nearby gardens. Customers arrive one after another. Smiles replace the tired expressions you often see on ordinary mornings. People greet neighbors they have not seen for weeks. Children press eagerly against the bakery window, hoping for a small sweet roll or a broken piece of crust. Whenever a loaf cracks slightly during baking, you quietly hand the extra piece to a waiting child. Their grateful smiles are worth far more than a single coin. By midday, the village square is alive with celebration. Long wooden tables are covered with roasted meats, cheese, vegetables, pies, and baskets overflowing with fresh bread. Families gather together. Travelers are welcomed. Even strangers are offered a place at the table. You pause outside your bakery for the first time all day. The warm smell of bread drifts across the square, mixing with laughter, music, and the distant ringing of church bells. It reminds you of something simple but important. Bread is not only food. It is part of every celebration. It brings families together. It welcomes guests. It marks weddings, harvests, holy days, and joyful reunions. As the afternoon sun shines over the festive village, you feel a quiet satisfaction. Your work began long before anyone else awoke. Yet without it, today's celebration would never have felt quite complete. The festival has ended. The music has faded, the market stalls have been packed away, and the village has returned to its familiar, peaceful rhythm. Inside the bakery, only one task remains before you can finally rest. It is perhaps the most important task of all. Saving tomorrow's bread. Not the baked loaves stacked upon the shelves, but something much smaller. Hidden at the bottom of your wooden mixing bowl is a lump of sticky, living dough no larger than your two hands. To an ordinary visitor, it looks like nothing special. To a baker, it is priceless. You gently scrape it into a small earthenware crock. This is your sourdough starter. Every loaf you bake tomorrow, and the day after that, depends on it. You feed it with a little fresh flour, a splash of clean water. Then you stir slowly with a smooth wooden spoon until the mixture becomes thick and creamy once again. No one in your village knows exactly why it works. There are no microscopes. No scientists explaining invisible yeast. Only centuries of experience. The old master who taught you simply said, "Never let the starter die." You have followed that advice ever since. Each evening, the starter is fed. Each morning, a portion is mixed into fresh dough. Another portion is carefully saved again. The cycle never ends. Some bakers claim their starter came from their grandfather. Others whisper that a famous city bakery has kept the same living culture for generations. Whether the stories are true hardly matters. What matters is consistency. A healthy starter produces reliable bread. A neglected one can ruin an entire day's work. You lift the crock toward your nose. It has a gentle, slightly sour aroma. Fresh. Pleasant. Exactly as it should. Your apprentice watches with curiosity. It smells strange, he admits. You laugh quietly. So did I, when I first learned. He asks whether every bakery has its own starter. You nod. Just as every baker has different hands. Even if two bakers use the same flour and the same oven, their bread will never taste exactly alike. Small differences in the starter, the water, the air, and the rhythm of kneading create subtle changes in every loaf. It is one of the quiet mysteries of baking. You carefully cover the crock with a clean linen cloth. Not too tightly. The starter must still breathe. Then you place it on a wooden shelf near the warm oven, where it will remain through the cool night. Nearby, the great brick oven is slowly releasing the last of its stored warmth. Its heat no longer blazes. Instead, it fills the bakery with a gentle, comforting glow. The walls themselves seem to breathe warmth back into the room. Outside, darkness settles over the village. One by one, windows grow dark. The final customers have long since gone home. Only the occasional hoot of an owl and the distant bark of a dog disturb the quiet night. You sweep the last traces of flour from the workbench. The long wooden peel is returned to its hook. The mixing bowls are stacked neatly. Everything is ready. Tomorrow, before the stars disappear, the cycle will begin again. The fire will be lit. The flour will be measured. The dough will rise. And the little crock resting quietly on the shelf, the living heart of your bakery, will once again help feed an entire village. You blow out the candle. The bakery falls silent. Only the fading warmth of the oven remains, patiently waiting for another medieval morning. The bakery is quiet tonight. The last loaf has been sold. The oven still glows softly, its warmth lingering in the thick brick walls long after the flames have disappeared. You sit on a wooden stool, listening to the gentle crackle of cooling embers. It is peaceful. Almost too peaceful. For every medieval baker knows one simple truth. The same fire that feeds a village can also destroy it. You glance toward the timber beams supporting the bakery roof. They have darkened over the years from smoke, but they remain dry. Very dry. In a town built mostly from wood, fire is never far from anyone's thoughts. Most houses have thatched roofs made of straw or reeds. Walls are often timber frames filled with wattle and daub. Barns are packed with dry hay. Workshops store firewood, charcoal, oil, and cloth. Everything burns. A single stray spark, carried by the wind, can leap from one roof to another. Within minutes, an entire street may be ablaze. That is why your evening routine is as important as your morning one. Before leaving the bakery, you carefully rake the glowing embers into a small pile. You never assume a fire has gone out simply because the flames are gone. Hidden beneath gray ash, a single glowing coal can survive for many hours. Left unattended, it could reignite. Your apprentice watches as you spread fresh ash across the remaining embers. The layer slows the flow of air. The fire grows weaker. Safer. You never hurry this part, he observes. You smile. No baker should. Outside, a night watchman walks slowly along the village street. Every so often, he calls into the darkness, reminding people to check their fires before sleeping. His voice echoes between the cottages. Mind your hearths. It is a familiar sound, one that brings comfort. The village depends not only on good harvests and strong walls, but also on careful habits. You remember stories told by your father. Years ago, a neighboring town lost nearly half its houses during a single windy night. A blacksmith's forge had been left unattended. The flames spread from workshop to workshop until the church bell rang in alarm. Families fled carrying only what they could hold. By sunrise, little remained except smoking foundations. Those stories stay with you every evening. The bakery itself has been designed with fire in mind. The great oven is built from thick stone and brick rather than wood. Its chimney carries smoke high above the rooftops. Buckets of water stand nearby. So do barrels of sand. No one expects a fire. Everyone prepares for one. As the last glow fades inside the oven, you close the heavy iron door. The bakery grows noticeably cooler. The day's heat slowly slips away into the night. You check the wooden shelves. The flour bins are sealed. The lantern has been extinguished. The floor has been swept clean of loose straw and scraps of paper that might catch a spark. Only then do you finally step outside. The village sleeps peacefully beneath a sky filled with stars. Warm light flickers gently behind a few cottage windows. Thin streams of smoke rise lazily from chimneys into the cool night air. You pause for one last look at the bakery. Tomorrow, before dawn, its fire will burn once more. But tonight, it rests safely. For a medieval baker, mastering the oven is only half the job. Knowing how to tame the fire when the day's work is done is just as important. Without that quiet discipline, there would be no bakery, and perhaps no village left to feed. The sun rises over the rooftops, painting the stone streets with soft golden light. Today is not a market day. Nor is it a festival. Instead, you have another responsibility, one that every respected baker must take seriously. Today, the guild is meeting. You leave your apprentice to prepare the morning dough while you carry a freshly baked loaf through the winding streets. The guild hall stands near the marketplace, its sturdy timber frame decorated with the symbols of the town's craftsmen. Blacksmiths have their guild. Carpenters have theirs. Weavers, masons, and leatherworkers each belong to their own brotherhood. And bakers are no different. You push open the heavy oak door. Inside, the room is warm despite the cool morning air. Several familiar faces greet you. Some are older bakers with flour permanently settled into the lines of their hands. Others are younger masters who recently earned the right to own their own shops. Every one of them understands the same difficult life. Long nights. Heavy work. The constant responsibility of feeding the town. The guild exists for many reasons. It protects the reputation of honest bakers. It settles disputes between members. It trains apprentices. Most importantly, it ensures that customers receive bread they can trust. At the center of the room stands the guild master. His beard has turned almost completely gray, and he has baked bread for longer than many of the younger members have been alive. He raises today's first loaf. Your loaf. He studies it carefully. The crust. The shape. The scoring. The color. Then, with practiced hands, he cuts it open. A gentle cloud of steam escapes into the room. Everyone leans forward. The crumb is even. The texture is light. The crust crackles softly beneath the knife. The guild master smiles. A fine loaf. A simple compliment. But one worth more than silver. You take your seat as the meeting begins. One baker reports that the price of wheat has risen after heavy spring rains damaged nearby fields. Another warns that dishonest merchants have been mixing poor quality grain with good flour. The guild agrees to inspect supplies more carefully. Trust must never be broken. Later, a nervous young apprentice enters the hall. Today, he hopes to become a journeyman. He presents several loaves he baked himself. The masters examine every detail. One loaf is slightly uneven. Another has a crust that browned too quickly. Instead of mocking him, they offer advice. Turn the loaf sooner. Use less flour on your board. Give the dough a little more time to rise. Every experienced baker remembers making the same mistakes. Knowledge is passed from one generation to the next, just as it has been for centuries. Before the meeting ends, each member contributes a few coins to the guild's common chest. The money helps support widows, injured craftsmen, or families whose bakeries have been damaged by fire. Competition exists, of course. Every baker wants loyal customers. But when hardship strikes, the guild stands together. As you leave the guild hall, the marketplace is filling with life. Merchants arrange baskets of apples. Fishmongers call out the morning's catch. Children chase pigeons across the square. You return to your bakery with renewed pride. You may own only a single oven. You may bake in one small corner of the town. Yet you are part of something much larger. A tradition built over generations. A brotherhood of craftsmen whose quiet work begins while the rest of the world still sleeps. Tomorrow, before the stars fade, you will once again light the fire. Not only for your own customers, but as one of the town's trusted bakers, carrying forward a craft that has nourished countless generations before you. The morning has been busy. The shelves that once held neat rows of warm loaves are beginning to empty, and the familiar smell of fresh bread still fills the bakery. Outside, the marketplace hums with life. Farmers bargain over vegetables. Merchants display bolts of wool and linen. Children weave through the crowd with laughter echoing between the timber-framed buildings. Yet not everyone arrives at your door with a purse full of coins. A gentle knock breaks the rhythm of the morning. You open the door to find an elderly woman wrapped in a faded wool cloak. Her hands are rough from years of labor, and she carries only a small wicker basket. Inside are a few eggs and a handful of onions. She looks at the loaves on the shelf before quietly lowering her eyes. "This is all I have today," she says softly. You recognize her immediately. Her husband passed away several winters ago, and her sons now work on distant estates. She lives alone in a small cottage at the edge of the village. You take the basket with a grateful smile. It is enough. You place a warm loaf into her hands. She thanks you with a slight bow before disappearing into the morning crowd. Your apprentice watches the exchange. "You could have asked for more," he says. You shake your head. There will always be another loaf. But there may not always be another chance to show kindness. He nods thoughtfully. Life in the Middle Ages is never easy. A poor harvest, a harsh winter, or a sudden illness can push even hard-working families into hardship. Most villagers live only one failed harvest away from hunger. As a baker, you witness these struggles every day. Some customers pay with silver. Others with copper. Many bring cheese, butter, beans, herbs, or firewood instead of money. A few have almost nothing at all. The church also plays its part. On certain holy days, monks collect extra bread to distribute among widows, orphans, and travelers. Sometimes you quietly bake a few additional loaves, knowing exactly where they will end up. No one needs to know. The bread will find those who need it most. Later that afternoon, a weary traveler appears at your bakery. His boots are worn through, his cloak is patched in several places, and dust from many miles of road clings to his clothes. He asks for yesterday's bread. It is harder than today's fresh loaves, but it is also cheaper. You wrap it carefully in cloth. Before he leaves, you slip an extra small roll into the bundle. He notices only after walking several steps away. Turning back, he raises a grateful hand but says nothing. Sometimes gratitude requires no words. As evening approaches, the bakery grows quiet once again. Only a few loaves remain. You count them carefully. One will feed your own family. Another is already promised to a neighbor recovering from illness. The last two may be sold tomorrow morning, or perhaps they will become soup bread if they grow stale overnight. Nothing is wasted. You close the shutters as the church bell announces the end of the day. The village settles into the peaceful rhythm of evening. Smoke rises gently from cottage chimneys. Families gather around wooden tables. Children tear pieces from fresh loaves while parents pour warm stew into simple bowls. Across the village, your bread appears in dozens of homes. Some tables are rich. Others are humble. But for one quiet evening, every loaf carries the same purpose. To satisfy hunger. To bring comfort. And to remind a community that even in difficult times, sharing a simple piece of bread can be one of the greatest acts of generosity. Night has settled gently over the village. The marketplace that echoed with voices only hours ago is now almost silent. Wooden stalls stand empty beneath the pale glow of the moon, and the narrow streets are lit only by a few lanterns flickering outside homes and inns. Your bakery is one of the last buildings still awake. Inside, the warmth of the great oven lingers. Not enough for another full batch of bread, but enough to bake one final loaf. You gather the small pieces of dough left from the day's work. No baker likes to waste good flour. Carefully, you press the scraps together, folding them gently until they become a single smooth ball. It will not be the largest loaf, nor the prettiest, but it will be fresh. You dust it lightly with flour and place it on the wooden peel. The oven door creaks open. A wave of gentle heat greets your face. The fierce fire of the morning has faded into a quiet warmth, perfect for this last bake. You slide the loaf onto the warm stone floor. Then you close the heavy door. For a little while, there is nothing to do but wait. You sit beside the oven on an old wooden stool polished smooth by many years of use. The silence is comforting. Only the occasional pop of a cooling brick or the soft rustle of wind outside breaks the stillness. Your thoughts drift over the day. You remember the farmer who arrived before sunrise. The children who smiled at the smell of fresh bread. Brother Thomas carrying sweet loaves back to the monastery. The steward from the castle. Your apprentice proudly shaping his first respectable rolls. Every loaf baked today has already become part of someone's evening meal. Some are being shared around humble wooden tables. Others rest upon fine linen in the Lord's great hall. Yet all of them began the same way, with flour, water, salt, and patient hands. A warm aroma slowly fills the bakery. The final loaf is ready. You open the oven and lift it out carefully. Its crust is a deep golden brown, slightly darker than the morning's bread. As it cools upon the wooden rack, tiny crackling sounds echo softly through the room. It almost seems alive. You break off a small piece while it is still warm. Steam curls gently into the cool night air. The inside is soft, tender, perfect. You offer half to your apprentice. He accepts it gratefully. Neither of you speaks for a moment. Words are unnecessary. Fresh bread has a way of making silence feel complete. Outside, the moon climbs higher into the sky. Its silver light falls across the quiet village. Dogs sleep beneath wooden carts. Cats wander silently between the cottages. From somewhere far away comes the faint ringing of the monastery bell, marking the final hour before midnight. You wrap the last loaf in clean linen. Tomorrow morning, it will become your family's breakfast before another long day begins. Nothing remains to be baked. The shelves are empty. The flour bins are closed. The bakery smells of warm bread, oak smoke, and cooling stone. It has been a good day. Not because you became wealthy. Not because anyone praised your work. But because every family who came to your door left with something warm to place upon their table. And for a medieval baker, there could be no greater reward. Only one chapter remains. Soon, the fire will sleep. And so will you. The village is asleep. The last candle has been extinguished behind the cottage windows, and the final footsteps have faded from the narrow streets. Above the rooftops, countless stars sparkle across the clear medieval sky, while a pale moon quietly watches over the silent town. Inside the bakery, darkness settles gently. The great oven no longer roars with fire. Instead, it breathes a soft, comforting warmth that slowly escapes from its thick brick walls. If you place your hand against the stone, you can still feel the heat stored there from the countless loaves baked throughout the day. It is a peaceful warmth. The kind that invites tired muscles to rest. You sit on the familiar wooden bench beside the oven. Your hands bear the marks of another long day. A small burn across one finger. A dusting of flour still clinging beneath your fingernails. Sore shoulders from kneading heavy dough before dawn. These are not signs of hardship alone. They are signs of honest work. Around you, every tool has returned to its proper place. The wooden peel hangs quietly upon its hook. The mixing trough is clean and dry. The flour bins are sealed against curious mice. High on the shelf, your little crock of sourdough starter rests beneath its linen cloth, alive and waiting patiently for tomorrow morning. It is remarkable to think that such a tiny mixture will once again help feed an entire village. Outside, a cool breeze drifts through the alleyways. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls from the edge of the forest. A horse shifts softly in its stable. Then silence returns. You lean back against the warm bricks of the oven. In many ways, this oven has been your companion all day. Before dawn, it chased away the winter cold. At sunrise, it filled the streets with the aroma of fresh bread. At noon, it baked loaves for farmers, monks, travelers, and the Lord's household. By evening, it had become a quiet source of comfort, gently drying the bakery after another busy day. Now, like you, it is finally resting. You think of tomorrow. Long before the first rooster announces the morning. Before the church bell greets the dawn. Before the first farmer leaves for the fields. You will rise once more. You will unlock the heavy wooden door. Sweep away yesterday's ashes. Stack fresh oak logs. Light the first small flame. Mix flour, water, salt, and sourdough into new dough. And, as the sun rises, the warm smell of fresh bread will once again drift through the sleeping village, calling people to begin another day. The rhythm never truly ends. It simply pauses for the night. As your eyelids grow heavier, the bakery feels wonderfully still. The fading warmth of the oven wraps around you like a thick wool blanket. The stone walls seem to hold not only heat, but also the quiet memories of thousands of mornings and thousands of loaves baked by generations of bakers before you. Perhaps, centuries from now, these walls will still remember the gentle crackle of fire, the soft sound of kneading dough, the laughter of apprentices, the grateful smiles of hungry villagers, and the comforting aroma of fresh bread filling the cool morning air. For now, however, there is nothing left to bake. Nothing left to sweep. Nothing left to prepare. Only the peaceful silence of the medieval night remains. So, as the last warmth slowly fades from the great brick oven, and the stars continue their silent journey across the heavens, you close your eyes. And, at last, you fall asleep beside the cooling oven, knowing that when a new dawn arrives, the ancient rhythm of bread, fire, and village life will begin all over again.